I don't even know how to say this. We have to admit that we need help. And that comes from a position of humility. Laying it down at the foot of the cross, that comes from a position of humility. Saying, gosh, I'm really struggling in this area. Could you help me with this? That requires me first to acknowledge that I need help. And in a culture where it is expected that you show up and play full out, all out, and that you're on point all the time, it can create some challenges for being humble and acknowledging that you do need help.
Have you ever had misplaced expectations? Have you ever alienated your audience in how you communicated your message? Have you ever killed momentum with criticism? If you have, you're not alone.
Yeah. Although when you ask me those questions, it feels very lonely because I have to say yes, and yes. And I don't want to say, especially to that last one, I don't want to say yes. But the truth is, yes, times 3.
Well, would you like to know what one thing all of those have in common?
Well, I want to know. I think we're going to talk about it today. Should we talk about it today?
Yes.
All right.
Jen, I guess I should introduce you.
Oh, okay, let's do that.
You help 6- and 7-figure entrepreneurs master their message and launch their podcast in 90 days so they can leverage their offers and increase profits organically.
Yeah. Sounds really cool, huh? 90 days from now, you can launch your own podcast. But you and I know behind the scenes, it's not as simple as pushing a little button to say the podcast is going to be launched. And we also know that these 3 questions that you asked me, they challenge us regularly, whether we're a 0-figure entrepreneur just starting out or whether we're a 9-figure entrepreneur, because whenever we start that next level, when we look at the next level, we say, shoot, I don't know how to get up there. Mm-hmm. I know I want to get up there, but I don't know how to get up there. And then we start sending ourselves some of these messages, like the questions that you asked me. You want to talk about those today?
Yes, let's dive in. So tell me, in your life, in your business, in your climbing the mountain you are climbing right now, how has having misplaced expectations impacted the journey?
Oh my gosh. It's like a mountain climber that puts the pick in the mountain and doesn't ensure that all the ropes and everything are in place. I'm not a mountain climber. I'm sure I butchered that analogy. I'm not a mountain climber. It's like diving off the deep end into the ocean and you don't know how to swim. It's a lot like that. So when you have expectations that aren't realistic, it's usually because you don't have a plan. You have an idea and you have a vision and you get all excited because God has given you this dream and you're like, oh, okay, I've got to go run and do this thing. And you don't really worry about the how until you take off. And then you realize, oh no, I don't know how to do any of this, but I know that I'm supposed to do this. So you think you do that should, which is really code for shame. I should know what to do. I should have it figured out by now. And whenever we do this should, that we're sending this message to ourselves that we're missing the mark. And you and I, we wouldn't talk to each other that way. And our friendship is really new. It's just beginning. Yet I would not should on you. I would encourage you and I would support you. And I would ask you questions like, have you thought about this? What would happen if you hired someone to help you do this thing? Oh, wait a minute. What is your big dream? And how can we create a plan that goes around that? And I'll use podcasting, this launching in 90 days as an example. Many podcasters say, I want to start a podcast, but they do not understand how it fits into their business plan. So whatever that idea is that you have, I think it's important that we place realistic expectations around it by planning, which I know you and we love that stuff.
Mhm. I was just thinking when you were sharing that sometimes when we are executing a 90-day plan, whether you're doing a podcast or we're creating a new campaign, we're doing something in 90 days. If we don't have the plan, it creates anxiety and creates fear because we don't know what our actions are supposed to be. And then when we do have a plan and it doesn't go according to plan, we also have anxiety and fear around like, oh no, I'm off track.
Yeah.
And that both sides of that coin bring up shame. It brings that I'm doing something wrong. I'm not hitting the mark. I'm never going to achieve what I want to achieve, which then it puts us in this fear mode. So that is like a perpetuating cycle of reinforcing a narrative around expectations. So along this journey of executing a 90-day plan, where does like having a clear message or clear target or even your own psychological messaging to keep you moving forward without getting stuck in it being perfect?
Yeah, perfectionism is a real thing, and I think that really ties into expectations. So, accountability is critical to say, okay, how can I stay on track? So, I'm going to make the assumption that we have at least a skeleton plan of this is the business I want to create. So, when we have that, we need to set some goals, and they need to be reasonable goals. So, if you are launching a podcast, for example, it's an unreasonable goal to say I'm going to have 100,000 downloads in the first month. It's not realistic. But maybe you could say, okay, I know 50 people and I'm going to share what I'm doing. I'm going to invite those 50 people to listen to my podcast and leave a review. So maybe a realistic expectation would be I'm going to shoot for 20 5-star reviews and I'm going to reach out to 200 people. Now, I said maybe 50 people, so you've got to close that gap of 150 to say, how do I do that? Well, you can show up on social. You can tell people in the grocery store who you meet. I mean, we need to be uncomfortable doing some of this stuff. I mean, being entrepreneur is really the most challenging role I've ever had in my life. And I'm also a stepmom. I used to say that was my most challenging role. But in comparison to being an entrepreneur, you're always looking for that next thing. So I think breaking down the plan to say in 30 days, I can. In 60 days, I can. In 90 days, I can. And if you're brand spanking new at this, you could say, in 90 days, I'm going to evaluate everything I've done. And then I'm going to make a new, I love 90-day sprints because they're manageable. It's a chunk of time to say, I can really focus my energy doing this thing. So if you're entering a new market, then in 90 days, you can take the approach of what am I learning? And the expectations would be some reasonable goals that you would set based on what you know right now. So based on grace and what you know right now. So did I answer your question? I think I did. Did
I
I?
didn't even think I asked a super clear question. So however you answered it was fabulous. Of grace. So 3 of my values, they're all G's, but gratitude, grace, and grit. And grit stands for God really is there. And grace is so important because we aren't going to get the messaging perfectly. We're not going to execute perfectly. And there is a grace for all of those things. And having the expectation of perfection stifles us. So as you're executing a 90-day game plan, let's just use the podcasting as an example because I think you're great at podcasting. It's what you do, and you
Thank
help people create messages on their podcast. And we know that as a business owner, that you have a message regardless if you have a podcast. So we'll use the podcast as the framework, but messaging is also applicable to you're across the table from somebody having a conversation. You're at your dinner table having a conversation. There's messaging. So one of the ways that we can maybe hurt our messaging is if we're abrupt in how we communicate it, or we alienate people in how we communicate it. So how do you help people craft their message so it brings unity?
I pause there because it's a very important question. So when I think about when I want something, how am I going to go about and get it? Am I going to be the bull in the china shop? Because I'm going to break a lot of pieces of china. And if I'm thinking about that, if I use that and say, okay, in my relationships, do I want to break my relationships? And whether you're in business or whether you're having a conversation with your 17-year-old who won't clean up after himself, no matter how many times you've yelled at him, hollered at him, invited him, threatened him, you want to be able to create meaningful connection and conversation. And that's where I think we have a responsibility to meet people where they are. And yet we often come at, well, I'm going to go back. Being in a step family is such a great example. So I'm a mom of two girls and a stepmom of two boys. So I thought I had it nailed with girls, and then I got boys, and they were 13 and 9 when we blended our family together. And let me tell you, talk about a paradigm shift and expectations about not meeting expectations. The boys could not meet expectations in my home because they didn't do anything the way that I did things. And it took me some time before God taught me that it wasn't all about Jen and about Jen's expectations. It was about creating new expectations. So I really want to make this applicable in your life. So I want you to pick the person that you're having the most challenging time communicating with and ask some questions. What do they need? What's important to them right now? What kind of relationship might they want to have with me? So asking questions about where they're coming from, I think will help you create a more meaningful connection and ask questions that really are designed to draw things out. Now, in the beginning, you asked 3 questions that were yes or no. And unfortunately, I answered all yes. But when we ask questions, we want to ask open ended questions, approaching it with curiosity to say, what kind of relationship do we want to have? Do we want to walk away with here? And understanding that your expectations for things are different than someone else's expectations. So you need to come together to be able to create mutual expectations. So I'm going to use your teeny bopper as a great example who will not put his clothes in the laundry basket. What if you just gave him a little bye and said, you know what? You and I go round and round and round about your laundry, and I suspect you're tired of it. I know I'm tired of it. So, how can we meet in the middle here? There are 7 days a week. How many days a week do you think you could put your clothes in the laundry basket and then punt it over and see what your kiddo says? But all too often, we get stuck in this things should be a certain way. These are the expectations for how we run our business or how we run our home. And when things go wrong or they don't line up, we freak out and we ask questions that create anxiety for us and that have us operate from that position of fear that you mentioned. So I think asking powerful questions of the person you want to be in relationship with so you can have a meaningful conversation, so you can share your message, that's how it works.
I love the framing of that. And it's very applicable even inside of businesses and teams,
Yeah.
because most people want to show up, do a good job, add value, contribute, feel good about the work that they do. Just like you're the teeny bopper. They want to feel like they're at home. They want to enjoy the environment that they're living in. They don't want to be in trouble all the time. They want to feel safe and secure and loved. And when we frame it in a way like, hey, we want the same things, we just might be going around about it differently. How could we align and have aligned intentions so that we can be on the same page here versus alienating each other? I'm nagging you, or I'm micromanaging, or I'm coming down on you, and you don't like it and I don't like it. And so I love how you brought that all together. And I think that plays into that third question we asked too, which is, have you ever killed momentum with criticism?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot, probably way more than I even realized. So let's focus on that word momentum. The first part of that is moment. So each single moment matters and impacts the next moment. So right now, I'm at my kiddo's house and I'm hanging with my grandkids. These are important moments, and they're all outside right now to give Gigi some space so we can record together. So my being here, my moments with them are impacting their moments as well. So when I think about how I want to think, how I want to live moment to moment, well, honestly, Staci, I don't really think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps this is a, a message for myself to think about how do I want to capture these moments because they build on things. So whenever I criticize myself, when I say, gosh, I wish I would have done this thing and I didn't do it, I'm taking myself from here and I'm lowering myself here. And now I'm talking to myself from a lower position, which is not the best position. So I would say that criticism, it halts, it not only puts the brakes on the moment that you're having with yourself or someone else, it also sets you back. It takes you backwards. The self-talk, I know that personally I need to continue to work on my self-talk because I'm always going to a level that I don't understand. I'm not exactly sure how to get there. So I'm going to put this out there and then see what people think or see what kind of feedback I get, which, by the way, I just want to say this. I want to put this out there. Never, never, never go to your family and ask them what they think about what you're doing in your business unless they're an entrepreneur and they get it. Otherwise, they don't get it and they're probably going to wound you. So go to another entrepreneur who gets when you're in the thick of the ick and understands, yeah, this is really messy. Go to another entrepreneur and not a family member. Okay, that's a voice of experience right there because it's hard to come back from that.
Well, and this I think all speaks to identity and keeping our self-worth, our self-value, our identity intact
Yeah.
while we are out over our skis, while we are biting off more than we can chew, while we are putting ourselves out there to be seen. And in a way, the world can be critical. And so what we receive back from the world is like, oh, you could do this better, or you need to work on this thing. And when we internalize that, that like hurts us. Like you said, it wounds us.
Yeah.
And this is why separating our identity is so critical uh, from what we do, because it's what we do isn't actually who we are.
Yeah. I learned that the hard way.
Mhm.
I did. I learned that the hard way. So I had this awesome dream job. I was pursued for a couple of years and I finally said yes. And when I went 10 weeks later, the job was over. And it was over because we were not a good fit. And I had two options. I could resign or I could get fired. So that timing of that, it really was a process where God used that to teach me that my identity was caught up in the things that I was doing and not in who and whose I was. And that took me a while to really understand that lesson. So I am reminded of that as a business owner, that I need to remember that God has called me to this. This is not who I am. This is what I'm choosing to do because he has gifted me in this way. And it's easy to get caught up, especially in podcasting, download numbers and sales and all of the things that have to do with podcasting. Yet, if God has called you to it, to share your message in this way, then you have a responsibility to work on the how, to hone how you show up, no matter what happens, because He has. I mean, it's a stewardship thing
Mm.
that you and we love talking on a microphone. We love connecting with people in this way, whether we're showing up on video or we're showing up in your earbuds. We know that we can create real meaningful impact by sharing this message. But it takes courage. I mean, you and I were talking before we hopped on, like, how are we going to structure it? Thinking about how are we going to show up and serve the audience? Because if you're listening to today's episode, one, welcome. I am so excited that you are here. And two, this is for you because God doesn't make any mistakes. So there's these three things. I think it would be a good time to say what these three things have in common. I'm wondering though, have you guessed it yet? Have you guessed what these three things have in common? I mean, you and I, Staci, we know what they are, but I'm wondering, have you guessed it? This is where you'd love some talk back in podcasting, but we don't get it. I, I bet you guessed it, but just in case, so we're on the same page, Staci, you want to share what it is that we've been talking about?
So if you have ever misplaced expectations, alienated your audience in how you've communicated your message, or killed momentum with criticism, you're probably encountering imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do you do with that? I mean, I know I've been talking a lot, so I'm going to punt that to you. So, Staci, when you're encountering imposter syndrome, these three things we've talked about are signals to you that this is what might be going on. So, how do you get out of it? What do you do to move beyond it?
The interviewer interviews the interviewer. I love it. Well, actually, so this imposter syndrome thing comes up a lot. I coach a lot of high achievers, high performers, business owners, people who love to set goals, climb mountains, chase things, pursue them. And they continually feel like they're just not good enough. What they're trying to achieve is just out of reach, that they need to acquire one more skill or a better relationship, or they need to work harder, or they need to be more efficient, or they need to be more productive. And imposter syndrome, in what I've witnessed and experienced personally, is really a psychological construct of shame, because we are comparing what we're doing to where we think we should be. Again, that word should.
Yeah.
Where we should be, or what should be transpiring. The socks should be in the laundry basket. Like, we have all of these shoulds. And then we create this lens on life, this perception of the way things are supposed to be. And that means that if it's not what we think our perception is not congruent, we think something's wrong. And if something's wrong, then our mind search for fault. Who can we blame? Who's at fault? What's the problem? And then if we don't blame externally, or we don't blame circumstances, we blame ourselves.
Yeah.
And then that disconnect creates the imposter syndrome, because we feel like it is our responsibility. And in one hand, it is. And then on the other hand, I like to say it's part of the journey. You're supposed to be encountering things that are obstacles or roadblocks or brick walls. That's supposed to happen on this journey, because that's where you build character. And on the other side of it is where you get to see a little bit further along your path. Jen, I'm curious for you, how does imposter syndrome, what does it mean to you?
Yeah. So the full story, this is what I thought when you and I first talked about, okay, let's focus on imposter syndrome. And I thought, oh no, really? Again, imposter syndrome? Because it seems like everyone is talking about imposter syndrome. Yet there's a reason why everyone is talking about this. So I think it signifies that you are up leveling, that you are, what is the expression? Off your skis? Is that what it is? That yeah, over your skis. That's it. You are over your skis. Which, what an exhilarating place to be.
Yes.
If you think about that, that's exhilarating. One of the things that I've learned in my journey, in my entrepreneurial journey, is how much I appreciate coaching and these kind of questions: the how and the what and the where and the when and the who. So, how did I get here? How did I get to feeling like this? What tripped my trigger that has me really criticizing what's happening? who can I reach out to help me move to that next level? Where do I go from here? So when you ask your brain these questions, your brain is so beautiful. It starts to go to work and says, oh, you want me to focus on this. So what if all of these things that I'm thinking about, how I'm feeling negatively about myself, what if they're not true? Oh, well then, hello mirror. That would mean that these things opposite are true. So I'm not going to pretend that I've got it all together, because I certainly do not. But I will say that I have it more together now than I did when I first started. And that's because imposter syndrome is something that comes over and over again. You said it so well, that we're always going to encounter this because we're unsure of what comes next. We know we're chasing something, yet the how can be, especially for women, I think as women, we definitely want to know, okay, so we're going on a family vacation. So where are we staying? Where are we going to eat? How many lunches do I need to pack? How much laundry do I need to pack? How much money do we need to take? How many parks are we stopping at? What are we doing? So we know the how. And yet as an entrepreneur, we don't get to know the how. We have to lean into, okay, this is the call, which, although it hasn't come up, I know that you and I are both women of prayer, and we believe it's important to lay it at the foot of the cross. So the very first thing I would recommend, if you're struggling with whatever, imposter syndrome, whatever it is for you, lay that at the foot of the cross and start there and say, God, I've got to give this all to you, because I am one hot mess right now and I don't know what to do. I know that it's okay that I don't know what to do. It's just not okay for me to stay there. And you're the first step for me to get out of here. That's how I would answer that one today. Ask me tomorrow. I might shake it up and answer it a little differently. But always pray. Always pray.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I think is so critical in the business journey is emotional regulation.
Yeah.
Like imposter syndrome is not really something that's transactionally happening around you. It's something that's happening inside of you. And learning how to emotionally regulate, and for us, prayer and accountability partners, friends, communities help us to do that, journaling, and asking ourselves questions and prompts. And when you were talking, I was thinking about the phrase, I'm part of a community that has the value that honor affirms value. So when I honor you, Jen, for being an amazing podcast host and an amazing business owner and an amazing mentor, it affirms your value. You're valuable in that arena. And when we are high achievers and we're growing and we're pushing the envelope of success and we're climbing a new mountain, we're moving into a new arena. And we have not yet proven to ourselves our value in that arena because it's new. And so I'm curious, and I'm talking out this loud. This is what I love about these types of conversations, is we get to have really philosophical conversations and then go test it out in our day-to-day lives. But as you're moving into a new arena in your life, as I'm moving into a new arena in my business and life, how can we bring honor to ourselves along the journey, even if nobody else around us is honoring us for the journey?
I think that goes to what you said as far as gratitude, one of your G's, that gratitude is really important. I have a great friend, and she is a celebration coach. And she's many other wonderful things as well, but she will always challenge me. Well, how are you going to celebrate that win? And I believe that's part of the answer to your question, is that celebrating, gosh, I made it through today. For example, when you're out doing something completely different, the fact that you survived that day and you're moving forward, that you learned something, I think is worthy of celebration sometimes. The small milestone. So if you're starting your podcast and you've released 4 episodes in your first month and you showed up the same time and day every week, that's worthy of celebration, no matter how many downloads you have, because you have to first show up for you. I love this emotional regulation. If you don't believe in what you're doing, no one else will believe in what you're doing. And when you enter that new arena, You're right. We don't believe, and we do need to be in an arena where people will lift us up. So you need to be lifting people up so that they can come up to the next level, and you can pull them up by being pulled up by someone else as well. So it's really, we're not meant to do life in isolation. And entrepreneurship, it definitely highlights that collaboration is the key, and really celebrating those small wins. So having expressing gratitude in a way to say, well, I feel like, even when you feel like you blow something, you could say, I feel like I blew it today, but I know that feelings lie. They're not always true. And the truth is, I showed up today. I showed up for my dream today, and it was hard. But I'm going to celebrate the fact that I showed up, and that I'm going to show up tomorrow. I mean, sometimes that's the win.
Yeah, I love that. I was on a hike the other day and I was reflecting on my own personal journey. And I was saying to myself, wow, I've gotten a lot of things wrong. And then I thought the other flip side of the coin was I got a lot of things wrong. And those are all the things that allowed me to get a lot of things right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the courage to celebrate stepping in it, making a mistake, stumbling over your words, having a message that alienates people, and then realizing, oh, shoot, I could say it differently,
Yeah.
and get the opportunity to say it differently is part of the journey. And I think in a world that doesn't offer a lot of grace, I think when we can start offering grace to ourselves and our journey,
Yeah.
and then holding a space of grace for each other, you and I for each other, you around your dinner table, we can start encouraging people to innovate, try, create, experiment. Because on the other side of that is invention and joy and excitement and enthusiasm. And imposter syndrome is, I think, in a lot of ways, the result of the performance perfection trap. I
Mhm.
have to be perfect even when I am figuring it out.
Yeah.
And that's not valid. It's not true. It's not helpful. It's not necessary. And it's not fruitful.
Yeah. I don't believe it inspires people, because
No.
when you show up and you're working through and people know, I mean, but you're showing up authentically you. And I think that's where, so this word has come through the entire time we've been talking. I thought, gosh, where is this coming from? The word is humility. And we need to humble ourselves. I don't even know how to say this, Staci, towards ourselves, in the sense of, we have to admit that we need help. And that comes from a position of humility. Laying it down at the foot of the cross, that comes from a position of humility. You and I connecting with each other, saying, gosh, I'm really struggling in this area. Could you help me with this? That requires me first to acknowledge that I need help. And in a culture where it is expected that you show up and play full out, all out, and that you're on point all the time, it it can create some challenges for being humble and acknowledging that you do need help. That is, I know the message for today was really talking about how we can identify when we're in imposter syndrome. And we talked about prayer being a way out. But prayer is really an act of humility. It is going before the Lord saying, I don't have what I need, and I need to come to you for what I do need. So, humility, there we go. I believe that's what God wanted me to share.
You know what this reminds me of? And is the ability to receive.
Oh, yeah.
We live in a world that almost receiving, it's like I don't want to be needed, or I want to give.
Uh-huh.
And the ability to receive feels vulnerable. It's like I need something from you.
Yeah.
Therefore, if I'm receiving from you, you have power over me. You've won up to me. You're controlling.
Mm,
You're dominating me. And so the humility that you're saying is also the ability to be vulnerable so that we can receive help, resources, a new perception on whatever it is that's happening around us and lean into that shift with courage versus white knuckling it. And so sometimes, I guess, in a way, imposter syndrome is a request of your next journey to accept your human limitations that you have right now and lean into the collaboration for the next phase of you.
So what if, so I'm thinking about, okay, how would we title this episode? So what if imposter syndrome is the best thing that could ever happen to you? That would shake it up, right? That would shake it up. What do you mean? That's the worst thing that can happen because it doesn't feel good. So fascinating. So I want to share this story. So I mentioned that I'm hanging out with my grandkids. So I have 5 of them, all from my daughter and my son-in-law, and their ages 9 to 3 months tomorrow. So they're all pretty close in age. And the oldest one, James, we recently got him a skateboard for his birthday. It's this blue light up skateboard, and we got him the elbow pads and the wrist pads and the knee pads. And he hadn't been practicing. He hadn't gone out because he thought, 9 years old, he thought, I'm just going to hop on the skateboard and I'm going to go. So my daughter was sharing with me that he is very much a high achiever and wants to nail things right away. So he wasn't really on a skateboard very often. So when we came back for this visit, I asked if he would show me what he could do on a skateboard. And he wanted to quit pretty quickly because he wasn't doing all the tricks. Except, I mean, if you can stand on the board, that's pretty good. That's a great way to start. But he went from standing on the board and feeling hesitant to my husband, who's called G Papa, was showing him how to balance and move his body. And that's exactly what we need to do. We need to practice. And when we feel like quitting, we probably need to go one more rep. So he said, okay, I'm done now. And I said, I'd like to see you go around one more time. And it was such a difference in the confidence level and in the movement. So if you're struggling right now and saying, I just don't even think I have one more time in me, I want to invite you to reconsider. What if that's not true? What if you just did one more go round of what you've been practicing? I bet you're going to see a difference. And I just want to encourage you to do that. Go get that thing. This is your dream. This is too important. Imposter syndrome. Okay. Let's acknowledge it's real. And then let's learn from it and move from it to go do the next thing. Like, go get it. Go get it.
Yeah, because your message is your mission.
Yes.
Words mean things, and words are what we have to communicate.
Yeah.
To connect, to share. I mean, along with tone and our energy and all of that, but don't let imposter syndrome stop you from living your mission and sharing your message and caring about impacting people in their business or around your dinner table, because the world needs you.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. And if you need a note of encouragement, I'm sure Staci would say this is totally cool with her. I'll tell you it's totally cool with me. You can find the links in the show notes and send me a message on the socials, whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook. Send me a message if you need some encouragement. It's what I'm a chief encourager, so I'd love to encourage you and help you move beyond. I don't want you to stay stuck, because we need what you've got. We absolutely need what you've got. So send me a message and I promise to reply.
I love that. So Jen, what are projects you have coming up that are stretching you right now?
Oh my gosh. Yes. So this whole reframing what I do and who I serve and how I show up. And there's been a lot of imposter syndrome in that. Gosh, is my messaging right? Is it resonating with the right people? So I'm working on a live launch, which terrifies me because a few years ago I did one and it was an epic fail. And I was so strung out. My husband said, I never want you to do this again. This was horrible. And it really was horrible. I mean, the internet went out repeatedly and I wasn't ready for it. And even though I hired a team, it wasn't the right team. So you may make a good decision, like hire the right team or hire a team, but it's not the right team. And so you learn from that as well. So I am deciding that was a learning opportunity for me and that will never happen again. And I'm going to use what I learned there to do a live launch to invite people in to really hone in on their podcast. So for us to spend 90 days together to get the content right, to get the messaging right, to get the format right, so that when you walk out of that 90 days, you are crystal clear on how you're showing up for each and every episode, whether you do a solo episode, whether you do a guest episode, whether you're audio only or you're a mix, a hybrid of audio and video. It's really important that you're clear on who you serve and what your message is and what your podcast is going to do for you. So I have no idea what it's going to look like, Staci, but I know it's coming. That's what I'm working on. That is really, it's a big chunk.
I love it. And I also love that you got back on the skateboard after you fell off to do it a second time.
Yes.
That is the courage that is needed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where can people connect with you?
Oh, yeah. So head on over to coachjenrogers.com. You can find me there. The best way to connect with me is not to go to the graveyard of the website and say, what do I do since I get here? So connect with me on the socials. You'll find my LinkedIn and Facebook on there that you can connect with me. I would love to connect with you to create a meaningful relationship so that we can support one another in our businesses and help each other recover from imposter syndrome and all of these things that accompany that, so we can keep moving forward. Because again, what God has gifted us with, the gifts and the skills and the dream, the world clearly needs them.
Yes. We'll put all of that in the show notes. And I'm curious, Jen, how would you define success?
How would I define success? Okay, so it is November 19th, 2024 right now as we're recording this episode. Success is being able to record a podcast with a woman who inspires me while understanding that I'm also taking time for my family to connect with my family. Success is experiencing life outside of my business, because my business is what enables me to do the things that I love doing. So those moments, it goes back to this is God's message for me, to focus on the moment by moment. That is success for me, is practicing that. So I know that I've got some work to do on that, but that is success. So I've learned something today. I've had a great time with you today. And gosh, I just love being in your presence. That's success. This is a huge win today. So thank you so much.
What came through for me when you were saying that was the parallel between momentum and moments that you had pulled in earlier, and the ability to be fully present. And success is being in the moment and appreciating all aspects of it. And you're doing that. So I appreciate you living success today, because you're doing what you view it as. And if you're a high achiever like Jen and I, who is pushing for growth, pushing to create moments with your family, create memories in your business, to create impact in how you communicate your message, we hope this blessed your soul. We hope it encourages you to overcome imposter syndrome, to connect with us and let us know how we can encourage and support you along your journey. And of course, if you're launching a podcast and want someone to help coach you and mentor you to have the right frameworks and tools and messaging and the courage to be seen, connect with Jen, because she's a powerhouse in that department. And remember that along your journey to stay rooted. There's all kinds of storms in business. There's all kinds of storms in the stories we tell ourselves about business or the people that we work with, but it's important to stay rooted while you execute and get your work done. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. And Jen, thank you again for being here.
My honor, my pleasure. Thanks so much.
Cheers, y'all.